So today I thought I'd start by explaining exactly what a barefoot minimalist or natural shoe is and comparing that to what we're taught at podiatry school is a good shoe. So the Foot Collective have this, is it called the 5 F's, what's that called, an anagram?
It's not an anagram.
Anyway, the 5
Acronym?
An acronym.
Sort of.
That we call the 5 F's of what we should look for in natural footwear. And the term natural footwear is interchangeable with minimalist footwear or barefoot shoes, all sort of the same thing. And so I'm going to take you through those 5 F's, which some of you might know, but it's always good to hear these things again. So the first of the F's is that it should be foot-shaped. So when we talk about foot-shaped, if we look at a child's foot that's never worn shoes or that has only ever worn shoes that are foot-shaped, they are still widest at the tips of the toes. And so the human foot should be widest at the tips of the toes. And nearly all conventional footwear is widest here. And so in podiatry school, we're taught to measure width here. And if you go to most shoe stores, they use the Bryant device, which is a measurement of this part of the foot here, which is here. And a shoe should be foot-shaped, which allows you to be able to splay your toes. And toes don't need to be splayed all the time, but they need to be able to move because a lot of the muscles in the foot are attached to the toes, which I can show you in my model later on. So it needs to be foot-shaped first and foremost, okay, compared to this. And this might still be considered wide in conventional terms, but then it tapers at the toe. And often you'll see people, I've got wide shoes on, they're 4 triple E or something like this, and that will be wide here, but still tapered. Almost like teasing the foot, but it's got this space and then it goes doing like this. So the first one is, first F is foot-shaped. The next F is that it should be fixed. So could you show me your sandal back, please? So in Australia, do you know what we call them if they don't have a back on here?
Thongs.
Thongs, yeah, that's right. Thongs. And what are they called here? Flip-flops?
Yeah.
And so a flip-flop or something that it doesn't have a back on it is not fixed. So the second F is fixed. It should be held on in some way so that we don't have to claw our toes. Because if we do this over and over again, we get really clawed toes. And our toes aren't made to claw as we push off. They're meant to be pushing down against the ground. So we want a shoe that's fixed. And so that's with a strap of some sort or laces or something that holds it on, so you don't have to change the way you walk to hold it on.
Birkenstocks can do that too, can't they?
Yeah, and I used to argue, I think I got used to barefoot shoes easily when I made that transition because I'd been in Birkenstocks, but I got the fixed back ones.
Yeah.
And the Birkenstock people will tell you that the lip on the back of the shoe is holding it on. It's not.
Yeah.
That you're definitely still clawing as you're pulling like this.
Or you turn your feet out.
Or you turn your feet out, and which turns your hip. You have to do from the hips so that you don't lose it as you go this way. You have to hold it that way.
Yeah.
So foot shaped, fixed are the first 2 F's. The next one, and they're non-negotiable. Everyone benefits from a foot-shaped shoe. Although I had a client that had lost his first and second toes, and so it may have not been that important. That was a lawn mowing accident. We had him in foot-shaped shoes with a little like a prosthesis there, so that he could still use his big toe joint because he'd lost from just in front of the big toe joint, which was really fortunate because he could still use it. So yeah, that would be a rare situation, but nearly everyone is nearly everyone is going to be benefiting from a foot-shaped shoe and definitely benefiting from a fixed shoe. Okay, without any issues. They don't have to transition to those different aspects. So foot-shaped, fixed. The next one we're going to go to is flat. So from heel to toe, the human if they're going to have a shoe on, it's designed to stand on something that's flat. Anything that has got a heel, a raised heel, is putting you on the side of a hill all the time. And of course we can accommodate walking down a hill, which would do the same thing, but we shouldn't be on that hill all the time. So this is a heel. This is quite this might be a 1.5 to 2 centimetre heel, but even your regular trainers, your, what was the brand? Skechers will have a 1 centimetre heel in them. Your Nikes will have a 1 centimetre heel in them. And that might not be a lot in the short term, but wearing it over and over again is not the way our body's designed to be on a forward pitch like this. And often when someone, and we had someone in the shop this morning try on a barefoot shoe for the first time, and she said she felt like she was falling backwards. And that's because when we put a shoe on, our brain goes, oh, quickly reorganise all my joints from my ankle, my knee, my hips, my lower back, my upper back, my neck. I'm going to reorganise them all to accommodate the fact that I'm now standing on a heel, otherwise I'll fall forward. And so you put the shoe on and it doesn't have the heel, and your brain still thinks you're going to be having to reaccommodate, and so you feel like you're falling backwards because it's tricking your brain. After a few wears, you don't get that feeling anymore, but I find that very interesting that our brains are so attuned to being able to make these changes very quickly, just because you put the shoe on. That person, when they're barefoot, doesn't feel like they're falling backwards. So flat should be from heel to toe. And part of that flatness is also something called toe spring. A lot of modern shoes have something called toe spring, which helps us push off and lifts our toes off the ground. And so flatness should be that it's flat. So you can actually activate your toes as you push off as well, rather than having them lifted up like this. And then flat also accounts for arch support. Our arches of the foot, there's three. There's one across here. There's the one we all know of here, and there's one here. They should be moving objects. They should be able to change shape as we move. There's not like a perfect arch. It's okay to have low arches. It's okay to have high arches. We just want them to be able to move. And so if a shoe has an arch and it stops the arch moving, then that's not ideal. So we want a shoe to be flat in that respect as well. So foot shaped, fixed, flat. Next we're going to go with feel. So we want to be able to feel the ground. And this speaks to what Jim was saying, that this sensory input to the ground. If someone has had falls, then we want their body to be able to feel the ground so it can feel its environment. It's going to a really thin shoe can be a bit much if you've been in a cushioned shoe. And so that's something that we might have to do gently. Similarly with a heel, that flatness, we might have to do that change gently as well and do some work on our feet to get us used to going into a flat shoe and used to going into a shoe that has some cushioning, a lack of cushioning, with adding some cushioning. And so we have some shoes here like that today, like Ultra. They're flat, they've got a little bit of toe spring, they don't have any heel, but they've got some cushioning to help, and a little bit of stiffness, which is the final F, which is flexibility. Our foot has all these joints for a reason. When we land, our foot should be accommodating an uneven ground using all these joints. And if a shoe is stiff from heel to toe, only flexing here, then all these joints don't get a chance to express the way they should move. But again, if someone's used to this stiffness and we put them in the shoe like this, that might be a bit much. So we might use a shoe that's got a little bit more stiffness in it. And conventional podiatry still says you should only have a shoe that flexes here. Likes the idea of a heel, says you should have cushioning, all these things that are taking our foot away from its natural function. So a natural shoe lets your foot just do its thing, and this type of thing takes you away from that in some way. That's the 5 Fs.
It's probably good as well to give a bit of historical context as well to how we got here with shoes being the shape that they are. This is one of the reasons I got involved with the Foot Collective. I was a journalist by trade before I jumped on board. I was a crime reporter. I'm Matt, by the way. Yes, I was a crime reporter for years and on the telly, and jumped on board really because I think I realised what a big story there was to tell here. And there's a big crime that's been going on, and it may sound like a bit of a conspiracy, the big footwear conspiracy we call it, but shoe companies today do know that shoes should be foot shaped, and we know that very big brands have trialled and tested footwear that are shoe shaped. But if they were to change, it would go against everything that they've been telling us for so long our feet need. And really, the reason we got to that tapered point, we go back thousands and thousands of years to the Egyptians, the pharaohs and the royalty would wear tapered shoes so as a symbol of them not having to work in the field. So it was a sign that they were above the workers who were out barefoot having to work in the field, and it was literally because they couldn't physically work in tapered shoes that they that they wore those, and then it carried through to the Middle Ages. Again, all the way throughout the ages, nobility were the ones who were wearing these tapered shoes, and obviously the heel on the back of these shoes as well was so that boots could fit through stirrups, and you had the heel so it would keep you riding your horse. So we added all of these things onto footwear, and again, it was sort of a sign of your status or your class in society. And there's been really some fascinating research done here in the UK. They dug up bones. I can't remember what. It might have been in the 15th or 16th century. They found this graveyard, and they examined the bones, and the people who had bunions or their feet had sort of deformed at the big toe, the nobility from wearing the narrow shoes had more breaks all across their bodies. So they had more signs of injury because of the footwear that they've been wearing all of these years ago. So we can't believe that we haven't known that for a very long time shoes for our health don't need to be shaped like that. But as we sort of progressed through the ages, and the industrial age meant that more and more people could afford the shoes like nobility, and we were able to produce these en masse, then we've ended up in a world where it's the norm to wear these shoes. And so a big part of our mission is to actually try and shift that culture and educate people around how we got here, and the fact that, yes, as weird as some of these shoes look, we can, really, if we start to think about health, ideally shift to a world where these round, weird-looking shoes are actually the norm.
But the shoe industry can get away with that, can't they? Until regular podiatry, conventional podiatry gets on board as well. It's coming from the professionals.
The professionals are obsessed with big shoes, big cushion shoes and pointy shoes, and they don't question it.
Well, it's conventional medicine all over, isn't it? It's a pill versus, actually taking responsibility for yourself and what your body can do. I mean, it's all shifting towards this, isn't it? Sort of the more natural way of taking care of yourself. And so.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, what has stuck with me is something you said on a podcast about the fact that podiatry didn't exist until the 60s.
Yeah,
was it?
It was hardly a thing. In the 60s, there was a big running boom, and the running shoe of the time was more like this, pretty much, but with more of a tapered toe.
Plimsoll.
Yeah, plimsoll, or we call them Dunlop volleys in Australia. Really thin and flexible, and you had to be athletic to be able to wear a shoe like that, because it involved using your body the way it should be used. And there's a big running boom, especially in the States, and that all these people that were sitting all day and unaccustomed to running had started running in something like this when they were living in something more like this, and were getting injured. They were getting Achilles injuries because this shoe takes load off the Achilles, and then when you go and try and run in something that loads it, then you get an Achilles injury. And so the running shoe companies of the time, the same running shoe companies we have today, went to orthopedic surgeons, the health practitioners, and said, what would you do about that? And I would still do it today. If someone was having trouble with this, I might help them by putting a little heel lift in and putting them in a bit more cushioning shoe until they got over it. But the running companies, the shoe companies, put heels and cushionings in shoes. And what they should have done is taught people to run with more effective technique, and maybe done some foot strengthening, the things that we should do to be able to run, almost to be given a license to run, but instead they changed the shoe to accommodate poor running. And so out of that came this idea that pronation was a bad thing, that injuries kept happening, they didn't go away, people just accommodated to running poorly, and so more and more injuries happening, and out of that came the profession of biomechanics and podiatry. And it hasn't really changed. They went through a phase of putting a lot of support in shoes on the inside because pronation was a bad thing. That's phased out now, and now we're in this big running shoe phase where your hockers with a rocker bottom sole and carbon plate shoes and massive cushioning. You're seeing the athletes running in these, but not just the athletes. You're seeing not the elite athletes, but just the local park runners are also running in these, and that's taking away from their natural foot function and is going to have some effect on the way their whole body's moving. You're basically outsourcing the foot. It takes away from the foot being able to do its job, and when you do that, it comes at a cost. Yeah. So that's where podiatry came from, really. This injuries caused by people not being able to run well.
Can you speak about orthotics then? Or is that, sorry?
That's a good question. So orthotics came from that as well, because pronation, which is the movement of our foot landing and rolling in, if we don't pronate, this is me not pronating, I'm just walking up, and this is me not pronating. Yeah, okay? I'm not supinating either, my feet aren't really moving. So pronation is the movement of our foot landing and rolling in, and it got really demonized and was thought to be a problem and a cause of a lot of injuries. And so an orthotic was predominantly used to stop our pronation or control our pronation. And so they had their place. If someone is injured and acutely injured, we might use it to help unload an area in the short term, but it's not a life sentence. And still the message is often, you've got low arches, you need an orthotic. You've got high arches, you need an orthotic. You have an arch that moves too much, you need an orthotic. All aiming at this perfect foot that doesn't really exist and doesn't mean you won't get injured. And so I think I still use them in practice occasionally for those acute cases, but mostly people come to me wanting to get out of them, and so we might use them in the short term and wean them off, or we might use them in the short term to help in the acute case, but mostly we try and get stronger using a big toe is one of the best supports of the arch. Strong ankles are very good supporting the arch, and strong and mobile hips are really good at changing and supporting the arch. So addressing those things rather than relying on an orthotic are probably, I think, more powerful, which is why we work well together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's worth just double clicking on that fact that Andy mentioned the three arches of the foot. Everyone's sort of mostly aware of that medial arch through there, and that's where you would see this pronation, or what is commonly referred to as overpronation, which is not actually a scientific term. There's no actual definition for what overpronation is. But what they're referring to is someone is going into pronation maybe too quickly, or they are not getting out into supination, or there's just a lack of control. But all of the arches support each other: medial arch, lateral arch, transverse arch. And so if you squish the transverse arch together, then the medial arch doesn't have as much support from that arch. And so this whole, I guess, the boom of orthotics comes from, well, we all have narrow shoes. There's no option, like everyone is wearing narrow shoes, and so that arch isn't supported, so now we have to externally support it. So it's just trying to chase symptoms, basically. Chase the symptoms of what the shoes are doing to people by adding more and more stuff to the shoe or putting things inside the shoe.
Where's the transverse one? It starts here and runs right through here.
Basically across the foot like that.
Yeah. And none of these arches are meant to be this way or this way. They're meant to be able to move, and they do. In natural foot movement, they all lengthen and then shorten as we push off the ground. But with every step different. You know, if you're on a beach, all beaches are camping. So your left foot, if you're walking, see to your right, will be lengthening more through this arch, and the right foot will be lengthening less through that arch. So there'll be more pronation on this one and less on that. Then when you walk the other way, the opposite happens. So our environment is telling our feet what to do, and our body moving over our feet is telling our feet what to do. They're the conduit between our environment and our body moving well, and it should be able to change and adapt. So to watch someone walk on a treadmill and say there's something wrong is not really seeing it in its natural state.
It's interesting too from a physiotherapy perspective. Even when I trained more recently than Andy, went through university, but in that course we're taught all of these different ways to exercise the body. If there's a pain condition or an injury, then we learn how to rehabilitate the body with exercise. Has anyone been given exercises by a physiotherapist? Or yeah, it's very common. And the idea is that let's say it's a sore shoulder. Yes, we might want to restrict movement at the shoulder for a period of time. Even if you were to break something, then yes, you put it in a cast and you restrict movement for a time, but you don't leave the cast or a brace on forever. You need to eventually strengthen and mobilize that body part so that you can actually regain function of it and do the things that you want to do with the shoulder. But we aren't taught about that for feet, really. It's just, even in my course, it was like, well, if there's foot issues, then generally refer to podiatry. And then podiatry treats it, well, I guess we just support the foot and stop it from moving, and then we just leave it and keep supporting it. If you end up with more pain or you have another issue, then I guess we support it more, and it just creates more of this cycle of dependence on external things. For some reason, only the foot works like that. The rest of the body adapts perfectly fine, but only the foot is impossible. It has no chance of adapting to exercise, which is very crazy. And actually, you told me that the story when you went through was that the muscles of the foot are too small to be strengthened or
Yeah.
to be exercised.
Yeah, which was similar to my wife was going through orthoptics, which is an eye profession, and they were doing special exercises to strengthen the eyes, but in podiatrist school we're like, they're like the muscles of the eye and they can't strengthen them. But there's my wife learning how to strengthen eye muscles with exercises. So if it's muscular, if there's a muscle in our body, if there's anything in our body, we can put a stimulus on it, a movement generally, and it will adapt to that movement. So that principle is the same for the foot as the rest of the body. So, if you want to get a bigger bicep, you keep lifting bigger weights. And so if you want to get stronger feet, you keep loading them generally in a graduated way, and they will get stronger. They will respond in the same way your bicep will.